So let's talk a little bit about taking care of your tabla, because if you've invested in a nice set, which I hope you have, you want to look after it. So probably the first thing to just be aware of is obviously, as I mentioned once before, is when you're not using your tabla, make sure that they're covered, that you have your covers on. These ones have ties, and so what I do to make sure that they don't come off, and hopefully you might have some like this, is you tie them to the straps so that the cover stays on. There's a few ways you can do that. If they're long enough, I'll generally tie them across like this, tie them together, and then here, and then that way stay there. It's really, really important. If for some reason you don't have a cover for particularly the baya, or even when you do, I usually have it sitting upside down so that nothing can fall into it and break the skin. You obviously can't really do that with the tabla, and I wouldn't suggest it. But I will quite often do that when I'm taking care of this. The big thing is that you're trying to protect this. Make sure nothing sharp comes into contact with them, because particularly the shahi and the gab are very, very delicate. And we talk about playing, even your fingernail can sometimes damage this. So you want to make sure that particularly these get very, very protected. Another thing about tabla is because they're skin, the weather will affect them. So you want to make sure that they're in a relatively cool, dry place as much as possible. Don't leave them in the open sun. Direct sunlight on the skins will make them go high, and sometimes, I've known from personal experience, they can split, and that can be quite unpleasant, especially if you have to rehead them, or hopefully, there's someone around that can do that for you. So just be very careful about that. Now, you also, when we talk about tuning, I'll mention a little bit about taking care of those. I generally detune my tabla when I'm not using them. In other words, I loosen the pegs up on the strap, just so that in case there's a change in the weather, nothing happens to them. You should always carry them in a case of some description. I encourage, if you don't have a padded case or a hard case, if you have them in a bag, make sure you put some towels around them and stuff, just to keep them protected. But look after them, because a really good set of tabla with a good skin can last you actually a year, 2 years, sometimes even longer. I've had a really well-made skin that lasted a long time and actually sounded great for up to 5 years. So just make sure you look after them. Another thing to be careful too is to not use too much powder. I've seen a lot of times people take powder and just like dump them on their tabla and stuff. The thing about that is it builds up and coats the skin, and it starts losing resonance. And it can particularly get lodged in the syahi, and that cuts down on the amount that it resonates, and it can kill the sound. So just be careful with that. I normally put the powder just a little bit on my palm and here, rub my hands together, and then play. There are ways to clean that if it does happen, but we'll deal with that another time.